Now, in spite of what my husband might tell you, I am starting to warm to that his favourite son. But let me begin at the beginning, and you can judge why I might warm to him. And every time I eat one of my apples, my mouth fills with the memory that it was his hand that brought them. And so, before humans ever could be, my grandmother ruled the world and sung forth her power. And up in the far hard north, where was of old her throne, before the darkness of Kronos overthrew his father. Up there, she had her special garden, where golden apples flourished in eternal sunlight. And as time unwound, that garden became the property of the daughters of Atlas, they who dance as the northern lights, weaving heavens to earth, holding them together in the void created when Kronos threw down great Uranus. All this is like a prelude, because when I came into my own, when I married my errant husband, my grandmother gave those apple trees to me as a fiat that I would be the new queen of heaven and govern where once she might. And the daughters of Atlas who dwell in the garden agreed they could not do anything else. These elderly aunts of mine, they are really cousins, but they're so much older, I call them aunts, agreed and said any time they were not dancing, I could come and take the apples. But you know how it is. Every time I went to take the apples, there were the dratted daughters dancing once again, weaving together the world and the heavens. And they would say, "Half a millennia more!" And I would stalk off and they would stop. But I knew the minute I turned back, they would start again. And so my apple tree grew huge and golden and beautiful, guarded now by the dragon that they had sung from the depths where the Styx rises. All that. And so I could only think of that apple tree in some kind of jealous fury. I suspect it was that knowledge of jealousy that first gave the tyrant of Tyrants the idea. I mean, the idea to send that bastard son of my husband looking for the golden apples that I jealously thought of. And when I heard it, I was enraged. How dare the tyrant of Tyrants give such a quest? And how could even the man of muscle achieve it? He stalked out the hall, for he understood what I understood, what we all understood. Being asked to go and pick the golden apples of the sun was the equivalent of our being asked to die on a plus quest. But he was not like other men. He didn't give up so easily, although he did not know where the garden could ever be. He went then, guided by some chance, perhaps Athena, north, along the coast, until he came to that land that is governed by the wild sons of Ares, and their great chief, son of Ares himself, challenged Hercules to fight there upon the plain, fights that he might avenge the murdered Amazons. Now, I knew, because I knew the story, that the Amazons hadn't been murdered so much by Hercules, but let that pass. And the two fought and fought and fought and fought, and Hercules could not be beaten. But the son of Ares had no equal. And so they fought again, until my husband split them apart with a thunderbolt, flipping his son over his head again and again, until he landed by the coast. By that wild son of Poseidon that can take any form. And the wild son of Poseidon came against him, bringing his dogs howling at last. And Hercules, fighting back the dogs, grabbed the son of Poseidon, he who can take any form. And the son changed from giant to serpent to dragon to gadfly. All of them Hercules held and held and held again. And at last the son of Poseidon took his form and sat in front of Hercules and said, "What do you want?" And Hercules explained his task, and the son said, "I don't know where that is, but one will know. You must go and find Prometheus. He hangs on the high rocks in the mountains of the Caucasus." And so Hercules strided off over the narrow seas, through great mountains, past Ararat and north, until he came to those mountains that lie on the northern rim of his world. And there he saw a mighty eagle, and as he watched, it swooped down like a vulture. And there, bound to the rock by my husband, was Prometheus the wise, he who had crafted mankind and given them fire, destined now for his impiety to have his liver picked out again and again. And seeing afar Hercules, and knowing he had arrows that could kill even a Titan, Prometheus said, "Slay me." But Hercules whispered. He drew back his bow and shot the eagle vulture down. And Prometheus, although bound still fast to the rock, collapsed in weeps of relief. And then he looked at Hercules and said, "I know what you want. You must go to the very northern rim of things, for there lies the garden of the gods, where the northern lights dance. And near at hand, to that pillar of that is my brother Atlas, fated to hold up the heavens and the earth. But you cannot pick those apples, for even if Hera would not kill you, Atlas's daughters certainly would, and they have the power to weave earth and heaven together." "How will I achieve the task? I cannot not do it, for I am bound." And then Prometheus, he smiled and he said, "Well, if you would have my idea, I would go to Atlas, who always strains against his heavy burden. Take the burden of the sky from him, but for an hour, and he will do what you like." And so Hercules stalked off north. And he went there, with many adventures, long and hard, sad and brave, to those northern lands, the north beyond north, where all is cold and all is dark and all is lost. And guided by the lights of the dancing sons of daughters of Atlas, he came at last to the garden. And he saw the daughters dancing in a tempest of fire. But just as he looked at them, suddenly there came twisting and turning like some old twisted thorn bush, the great dragon that the daughters of Atlas had summoned up from the Styx. Twang went the bow, and Hercules killed there in the garden a single arrow. And then he went a little further on, where Atlas stood. And Hercules said, "I am seeking Atlas, And the great giant, with the weight of the sky on his back, said, "Ha! Are you joking? You know that is me." "Well, I have a bargain with you. I can take the burden of the sky for a while, if you would do me a favor." "What?" "Could you go and pick the apples from the garden where your daughters lie?" And Atlas smiled and said, "Oh, they would let their old father, that is true." "All right, if you fear to go where their fiery fury lies, I will. But are you sure you can take the burden of the sky? For the great gods would kill me as they killed my brothers if I let it glow." And Hercules said, "I have never failed. My muscles have always succeeded." And he got ready to receive the great burden of the skies, opening up his back muscles as Atlas lowered the sky down. And when my husband's son felt that burden, I saw him wince and start as the full pressure nearly ground him down. I felt almost sorry for the wretch, as Atlas, all dark and fury and delight, his burden lifted, his great muscles moving as they would before time, when my husband had thrown him down at last, went to the gardens. He reached up the apple tree. He picked all the apples he could find, while his daughters danced around him in delight. And he smiled and said, eating an apple, "I think it is time for us Titans to take control again." And he went back to Hercules with a plan. He had the apples with him, and he said to Hercules, "Now, little pig, you are doing quite well. So why don't you let me keep these apples? I will take them to the king and tyrant of Tyrants. I will go much quicker than you will. I will be back before you know that I have gone, for we Titans have that power. And then you will be free of the burden." And Hercules stood amazed, the great weight grinding him down and down and down, but not so far that he did not see the Titan's trick. For it was true, a Titan can go faster than any man, than any god. But would he come back? And Hercules said, "All right, I agree, but if I am to take this burden longer, you will have to take it for a moment and let me move the lion off my back, for the sky crushes its head." And Atlas could see, "I see, that is true. All right, I will take the burden for a moment." And he lifted up his arms, and the burden was lowered once again upon his back, and Heracles rolled off, laughing, catching up the apples, and said, "So, no. I am sorry that it came to this at last. I hope your hour of freedom helped you." And Atlas roared his curses and his fury, his black hate, and he summoned the giants near. Giants that were children of Gaia herself, that she had put near the garden to guard it. And her favourite child, he who drews all his power from earth, came stalking Hercules at last. Far greater even than Hercules was he, for his strength came from the earth, and he raged at Hercules and struck him with a club. And Hercules, who was nimbler, jumped aside and knocked the giant over. But as the giant fell upon the ground, his strength waxed, and he became even stronger, even mightier. And it seemed he reached up to the moon and brought down meteors down upon Hercules. And Hercules jumped and jumped and jumped again. But again, he knocked the giant over. And as he saw the giant was growing strength, perhaps Athena whispered in his ear. But he knew suddenly what to do. He lifted the giant up. Now that giant, when not in touch with earth, shrunk and shriveled and shrunk like slug in salt. It shrank until at long last it was less than a man, and then less than a monkey, and then less than a maggot. And Hercules crushed it and took the apples back to the tyrant of tyrants. And the tyrant laid his hands upon one, but my apples burn hard and fast if touched by a non-divinity. Hercules could touch them because the fire of my husband's blood burned in him, but not the tyrant of tyrants. And what was more, as they were laid in the temple, they started to burn and burn and burn, and soon it was clear the temple would be burned down. Then Hercules, smiling and thoughtful, said, I had better take the apples right away. Do you know what the man did? He took them to my best temple and gave them to me. And so at last I have my apples back, and I will plant a garden of my own, here in high Olympus. It will be the delight of my husband and my daughter. And when I stand in it, I will remember not to hate Hercules.